And our first guest is C.W. Nevius, who is a columnist at the San Francisco Chronicle for over 20 years. Covered a lot of sports, including the Olympic Games, and now he writes a Metro column called On San Francisco that appears 3 times a week. Welcome.
Thank you, Art.
We've had many of your colleagues here. We've had the former editor of your paper here, and you've created some stirring, doing something the Chronicle used to do.
Yes, exactly.
The Chronicle used to create a lot of questions and uncover a lot of stories on inefficiency, immunity, and homelessness. And then it dissipated until you wrote about encampments in Golden Gate Park.
And what a fuss, Art, let me tell you.
I've read The Wall.
It's
and
been
we'll
something.
talk about that.
It's been something, yeah.
Someone said, I think it was Savannah Blackwell, said that she thought that you were out there covering the coyote story and then you saw the encampments.
You know, that's really true. That's really true, because immediately after our first encampment story, the mayor was very upset with me. We went in to talk to him about something else, and we got off topic, and he was very upset. And he said, I know what you're trying to do here. You're trying to stir up a mayoral race. You're trying to knock down my numbers. You're trying to get people to run. And
the mayor said that?
Yes.
And so he was actually concerned about his numbers.
He was very concerned about his numbers. And he was convinced that someone was going to run, which is something we can certainly get into.
We will.
But I said to him, and this is absolutely true, is that the coyotes were such a big story. When the coyotes were spotted in Golden Gate Park, what are we going to do with the coyotes? Then they shot the coyotes. It became a big, typical San Francisco story. But the side to that was we began to get emails from readers who said, I'm not worried about the coyotes. I'm worried about the number of homeless encampments that there are in Golden Gate Park that have been there for years. And they sent me out, and that's what we uncovered.
And, well, let's go through that process. How did you do that? How did you find encampments?
Well, some of the people who sent us emails were actually very involved in the restoration of Golden Gate Park. They were volunteer gardeners and so forth. They knew where a lot of the encampments were. And they said, if you'll come with us early in the morning, unannounced, we can show you places where there will be 20 people camped. And we found in particular, just for starters, on the very first day we went, 3 separate areas, all of which had syringes, used needles. One of which, the guy told us that he'd been living there for 4 years, wasn't really bothered that much. He lived out by 25th Avenue, and he had a lawn chair, he had a bookcase, he had a tent, he had a tarp. There was a group of 10 or 15 of his friends that came through. He had a little campsite that he had lived in for quite a while. And that is obviously not the idea of what a public space is supposed to be. Did
you have an emotional response to it, or were you just watching it as a reporter?
Well, I was, up until I saw the needles, to be perfectly honest, Art. Right there near the entrance to the park, right on Stanyan, we talked to one of the gardeners, and the gardeners have been told not to talk to the media, but one of them kind of pointed us in the right direction. And I said, are you seeing a lot of needles, a lot of used and new needles? And he said, go over to that thicket over there and tell me what you see. And we walked into this thicket, probably chest high, and there was a clearing. And there was a stack of probably 20 new needles in an array right there. And around the ground were used needles, discarded needles. They'd been used to inject and then thrown away. And I've been at this, as you said, for 20 years. But to be perfectly honest, I was shocked. And that's kind of what fueled my sense of what is going on here. I mean, homeless people obviously need a place to be. I don't know what they're going to do. It shouldn't be in the park probably. But I'm not morally offended by that. But I am morally offended by the fact that people could walk through the park, step on a needle, their dogs could get poked. I just found that appalling, and that's one of the things that really drove this.
What do you make of the fact that there doesn't seem to be a major reaction, except that it was a great story, but the outrage that you would imagine is a symptom of the voter or the San Francisco resident on a whole host of issues?
Right.
I just collected, by the way, finally, the police stats for the last 5 years because I heard the mayor talking about them. Now, I'm going to write an article about it, but it's shocking that violent crimes are up 78% since 2002. 78%. These kinds of incidents and factors don't seem to resonate with the people who answer the polls, which you also written about.
Yes. Yes.
How do you explain that?
Well, I think that we're all busy. We're all running through a series of things. I think a good example would be something else that we got onto when we did this, which is the needle exchange. There is on Cole Street, right there in Hayden, a place where addicts can go and exchange dirty needles for clean needles. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, this was a huge controversial issue, and it was a nationwide issue. Were we going to allow these in our cities, not just in San Francisco? People fought this tooth and nail. It came to San Francisco, it became established, and I think, for the most part, I think it's a good idea. But I also think that people felt like that's been handled, we'll let it go. And I don't think there was much oversight to that from then on.
This is the consequence, needles in the park?
And I think that's the consequence. We're seeing needles in the park.
You also, didn't you talk about a recycling center that you thought?
Another example.
And this is where the forum in San Francisco, probably made up of only about 12 people who write to each other all night and all day long. However, people read it.
Yes.
You got slammed viciously for your column, and they didn't read about your encampment focus.
Right.
They got you on a recycling center. Why don't you explain that?
Well, there is on parkland, on Golden Gate Parkland, a recycling center that has been in business for many years and really came into being at a time when recycling was a crazy, not a crazy idea, but an idea that people generally didn't think of. Recycling was a new concept. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. They started it, and it's been in operation for a long time. It has since become a bit of an institution among the Haight-Ashbury Association, and those are the people I think who are writing. Now, since then, as we know, salvage companies in general, everyone recycles. We have a recycle bin. It has become, not for everyone, but for many people, a little bit of an ATM for homeless people who come over and who freely admit that they go into the recycling bins in the residential areas, clean out the cans and bottles, take them over there, drop them off. They're waiting in line in the morning when the recycling center opens, turn them in, get $12, $15, and that's enough for whatever they need. If they're drinking, they can buy.
What was your concern with that?
Well, what they were trying to say was that this was a good idea because it was keeping the homeless people doing something. And in concept, that's not a bad idea. If they were cleaning up Golden Gate Park, which is what people were saying that they were doing, that makes a certain amount of sense. But if they're going over into the residential bins, the recycling bins, and in some cases the neighbors were complaining, they're tipping these over, they're picking the things they want, they leave it there.
They leave the trash, on the street.
Exactly.
I see that.
This is not what we had in mind. And what exactly is our reason for having a recycling center at this anywhere, really? We've got recycling everywhere. We're able to recycle all of our cans and bottles we don't need the incentive now. So my sense was this was an idea that had outlived its time. And in fact, one of the reasons that we're seeing so many homeless people in Golden Gate Park, they're not being observed. They're not being asked to leave when they camp. And by the way, we also have this option.
So you saw
this
able to earn money. Part of a syndrome here. What do you make of the fact, and this was something that was suggested at the wall, but it's always been suggested to me prior to talking to you. We spend about $200 million a year on homeless programs. That's almost $1 billion in the last 10 years, and in the last 20 years, it'd be $2 billion. In the last and it's been 30 years, so it's actually $3 billion spent. This is a major industry in San Francisco.
Right.
The beneficiaries being a whole group of nonprofits. Do they have an investment in seeing the problem not solved is the question.
Well, that is a good question.
Is it a good question?
And I think it's a good question about the recycling center. I mean, their budget is over $250,000. That's public record. You can certainly find that anywhere.
Where does that money go?
Well, that's a good question, too. Their rent is $5,000 a year. So they're saying it's going to programs, the maintenance, the operation of the center. I don't know, but there is a vested interest in keeping this going, I think, and that is a concern. And I think you're right. There's a cycle of homeless enablement that could be a real problem. Now, I don't think we've got a great solution. I know the homeless people that I talk to at the park hate the shelters. They think they're dangerous. They're not able to create a sense of community there. I don't know that we're moving in the right direction with that. But I do know that it's not a good idea for them to sleep in the park.
Where should they go?
Well, that's the question, of course, everyone asks. And I have said I'm not smart enough to solve the homeless problem. But I can tell you that in a public space, they shouldn't be camping in a public space. They certainly shouldn't be leaving needles.
So does it imply that when certain people in the administration claim that the homeless situation has been alleviated by, quote, Project Connect,
right,
that in fact that program has been a failure because it only handled a very small part of the population?
It's always going to be a small part of the population, and you're only going to reach a certain number. We're also running into, in our travels in Golden Gate Park, a lot of people who need psychiatric care. And that goes back to the administration who closed a lot of those facilities. We're looking at a certain number of people who would love to have help, And some of those people are getting help. Not all of them are getting help. But we're also looking at a large number of people who don't want to change their lifestyle and are in a way being enabled, and I think that's a concern.
Don't you think, though, at some point, the one solution that has not been tried, which is called law enforcement, with imposed psychiatric care, not a voluntary one, and imposed confinement to facilities that could be created with the $3 billion that have been spent or wasted. When do you think the San Francisco voter, San Francisco resident is going to finally say, we've tried all of your solutions? First you wanted shelters.
Right.
Then you wanted, quote, supportive housing, which is voluntary and light.
Right. Counseling.
And none of the, and Project Connect, you know, in the Civic Auditorium once a month.
Right.
When do the people react to articles like yours and say, we haven't tried one solution that has worked in other cities?
Right, right. And obviously the first city that comes to mind, and the first city that was mentioned when these articles came out, is New York City.
And their community courts.
And community courts, and the cleanup of Central Park. But one thing that they were able to do in New York City, and you're right, the voters would have to be the people who would do this, is they passed an ordinance called the sit-lie ordinance, which is you cannot sit or lie on the sidewalk in New York City. And the reason is that they have a place for you to go, which is what you're saying. They have gotten millions of dollars, and some of it comes from the state, but they've gotten money to create viable shelters for these people
for
to
all
use.
categories of people.
So, yes. So if you are on the street, if you are in Golden Gate Park, they can say to you, get up, or we have a place for you right now. Right now. We're going to have to get you. You can leave, or we can put you in a place right now. There is no option of you in the Tenderloins.
When do you think San Franciscans are going to cross that line, or has it become part of the culture of the city to almost, even especially among tourists, just accept it like you go to Venice or other tourist cities?
This is what you see.
This is what you see.
Right. Well, I think that's what I was a little bit trying to get at that before. I think that we do become complacent with our homeless, with our needle exchange programs, with a lot of our problems. But the thing that I saw that was different about the Golden Gate Park series was it hit people where they lived. And the neighbors in those areas did rise up. And that
area, excuse me for interrupting, but that area is the most liberal area. That's the Haight-Ashbury.
Right. Well, but I think the Richmond and the Sunset are people who are, and they're losing kids, we're losing families from those areas. The neighbors are extremely conscious of that. And I don't think that they are, at this point, as tolerant as they were. The other thing I think may be happening, and this was suggested to me by a park service guy who asked me to keep his name out of it, is San Francisco proper is going through a change. And that is, we're seeing, as we are in many cities, we're seeing a lot of empty nesters moving back into the city and buying high-end property. They've lived in the suburbs. They're not accustomed to walking out and seeing crack pipes on the street.
Have you been up into those high-rises? You can live in there all your life.
Never come out, yeah.
And never come out.
Right.
I was fortunate to go to the top of one Rincon Hill.
Yeah.
Still under construction. And it's been designed for you never to accept what's down below you as being the city. Your city is the city that you see.
The skyline.
You skyline.
But I'll be interested to see.
That's not a positive change.
Well, it may be, though. I'd be interested to see what you're saying about the liberal areas of San Francisco. I'm wondering if there isn't some kind of a change, and if it isn't a change in this. And it may not be. I didn't talk to many people who said they thought the needle exchange was a bad idea. I don't know what you think, but almost everybody said, I think this makes a lot of sense. However, it's got to be administered better than this.
You've identified, quote, unintended consequences. They always look good on paper. All the liberal ideas look good on paper till you let them work themselves out. Okay, listen, we're going to take a break. I want to come back and talk to you about some other items.
Not a problem.
Including sports.
Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.